Thank you, Mrs. Hood. I spent a half an hour, which I understand is probably 20 minutes longer than it should have been, getting here in the traffic from my hotel. I spent half an hour with your amazing principal, and I turned to her and said, I've been on the road with this book for 2 years and 3 months, and I don't think I've ever met a more impressive principal, more committed to the mental health and wellness of our kids alongside the rigor of the academic offerings at a place like this. Let's give a big round of applause to Mrs. Hood. Woo! Okay, here I am in Sammamish. Did I get that right? Yes. The Silicon Valley of Washington State. Is that possible? You got some places near you that sound an awful lot like the places near me. I hail from Palo Alto, California, so I think we are well aware of one another. We are privileged to be in communities that offer fabulous things to us, to our families, to our children, by way of opportunity, and we are at a moment in time when all of that opportunity and all of that excellence seems to be threatening the mental health and wellness of the people we love most, our children. And that's what I'm here to talk about. When I wrote How to Raise an Adult, I quickly got branded as a parenting expert. And I want to just say right off the bat, you guys, I'm not a parenting expert. In fact, I'm not all that interested in parenting. Really. I love my 2 children as fiercely as you love yours. I have Sawyer, my 18-year-old son, and Avery, my 16-year-old daughter, but parenting, not my thing. I remember when it was called child rearing. Raise your hand if you remember that language. Child rearing, and raise your hand high. Okay, but today we're parenting. It's all about us, you see. We put ourselves at the center of this endeavor to raise other humans. We've forgotten that there are other humans who should be the focus, or they are a tremendous focus, and we've forgotten that they need also to breathe. So I wrote this book, How to Raise an Adult, because I learned that though we act with the best of intentions, we're doing some things wrong, particularly in communities like ours of influence and affluence. We're doing a little too much, and it's harming our kids. Now, I want to just pause here and say, none of you, I'm sure, is doing any of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, right? I'm sure. But you're leaders in your community, and you're going to listen to me, and you're going to go out into the world tomorrow, and you're going to tell other parents how to be better parents, okay? That's our bargain, right? If we were closer, if you were sitting here closer to me, you would see me winking my eyes at you. I'm going to try to bridge this distance so that we can laugh a little bit more at ourselves tonight. Okay, so I was the dean of freshmen at a university you may have heard of, Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. And as the dean, and I'm a lawyer turned university dean, okay? I'm a lawyer first, I become a dean, now I'm a writer. As I said, I'm not a parenting expert. My job as the dean of freshmen was simply to give a damn about my students. Not about what their parents wanted them to become, or what their entire extended family wanted them to become, or their entire ethnic community expected them to become. My job was to care about the students in my freshman class. I knew many, many, many of the 1,700 every year. I had 17,000 over 10 years. And there were 3 trends that I noticed in my decade as dean of freshmen, 2002 to 2012, that concerned me. 3 trends. Somehow my students were more accomplished on paper every year. You know what I mean? Come on. You know what I mean. The grades, the scores, the accolades, the awards, the childhood resume that's longer than mine. You know, the high school transcript burnished to perfection. More accomplished on paper every year. You know, they had written more novels. They had obtained more patents. They'd cured more cancer. That's right. You see that I'm going to be doing a lot of joking. And laughter will be good, so feel free to laugh. Right? So they're these amazing humans, and we're all saying, like, what? How is it that this freshman class is somehow more accomplished than the last? Because we were pretty sure last year's class, was the most perfect set of humans that have ever existed. But no, every year, somehow, the bar seemed to get even higher. That was one trend that was impressive in theory, but perplexing, as in, how is this humanly possible? Well, I'll tell you, I'm not sure it is humanly possible. Some young people emerge from this childhood unscathed, but many emerge scathed. The second thing that I noticed was that fewer and fewer of my students over the years were familiar with their own self. This is what I mean. Sitting in office hours with me, they could tell me what they had done. They could wave their resume and show me what they had accomplished, but they couldn't articulate whether, how, and why any of it mattered to them in a "this matters to me, I care about this" kind of sense. Over time, I worried that too many of my students were simply just incredibly good at following directions, at following very high expectations from parents and community and their educators and so on. I worried that my students were just incredibly good at doing as they were told. But had anyone asked them, what do you want to do? Had they been given the chance to chart even a little bit of their own path? Over the years, this worried me. Very impressive on paper, not so familiar with their own longings, desires, dreams. Okay? The third trend was, please guys, come on in, don't feel badly, just come on in and find a seat, anywhere, over here or here. The third trend was we had more and more parents coming to our campus and staying. Okay? People who would come for move-in day, but just find a way to stay very connected by email, by phone, by text, with us, as well as with their child, as college students began being called in the last decade, children. Those of us in the room who are boomers or Gen X, we were not called children when we were 20 or 19 or 18, but they are today, and I watched that change happen. And so we'd have parents doing this type of over-parenting that I've written about at the college level. Over-parenting comes in three types. Okay, there's overprotection, overdirection, and excessive hand-holding, and we saw all three types on our campus. The overprotective parent feels, you know what, the world is scary and unsafe and unpredictable, so therefore I have to bubble wrap my child's every moment. Anyone know anyone in this category of the overprotective? Yes, that guy in the back is like, I know someone. They may or may not be here with me right now. Okay. Right? So it's not just the sharp corners of the house, but every possible corner and drawer that might catch on a little fingertip. We go out of our way to make sure the environment is protected, instead of trying to prepare our kids to be smart out there in the world. So overprotection at the college level is, I get a call from a parent. I'm concerned about my daughter. I haven't heard from her in a day. I've called 9 times, but she's not responding to my calls. I'm worried. I said, all right, sir. I'm looking up where she lives. I said, I can see where she lives. I can ask a dorm staff member there to just check in. Oh, I know she's there. I can see the blue dot. But I've called 9 times, and I'm thinking, gee, I wonder why she's not returning your calls. You crazy man. Okay, overprotection. Overdirection. This is often called the tiger parent type, often assigned to a certain community of people. But I'm here to tell you, I have seen tiger parents among African Americans, white folks, Latinos, Chinese Americans, Indian. I've seen everyone of every ethnicity behave as a tiger parent. It's this mindset. I know best what leads to success, kid, and you will do as I say. We're doctors. You will be a doctor. We're engineers. You will be an engineer. No family ever says, we're art historians. Don't come home for Thanksgiving unless you're majoring in art history. Nobody says that. Imagine if the world that would ensue if that was the case. It might be beautiful. In any sense, in any event. So the parent who's overdirective is kind of conditioning their approval, maybe even their love on the kid following a path, following the expected path that parents have laid. And the third type of overparenting is so at Stanford, the overdirective parent or the tiger type would lead to, for example, too many pre-meds coming to meet with me, desperate for someone to just listen as they spoke out loud about how they were forced to go to medical school and they didn't want to go to medical school. And we'd talk about, well, when do you think you're going to come out from under your parents' expectations and live the life you imagine? They imagined that day would come only when they were wearing that white coat. They could finally say, Mom, Dad, I don't want to be a doctor. The third type of overparent is the concierge, or the parent basically still holding the kid's hand long past the time of necessity. This is the parent who approaches parenting and might be a purveyor, a frequent user of that term, parenting, as kind of the, what can I do to make your childhood more pleasant, honey? I'm going to wake you up well into high school. I'm going to track your deadlines, keep track of your stuff, bring you your stuff when you've forgotten it. I'll be there on the sideline all the time, arguing with the coach and the teacher and the principal and the referee. I am there for you. I am your personal attendant. And so at college, it would be the parent saying, emailing us saying, I need my son's password. I have to register him for class. Well, I always have. He's too busy. It's too complicated. And I just like being useful, says the parent. But as the college administrator, I want to know that student can register themselves for class. Or my daughter is going to be studying abroad with you in Germany next year. And when is your parent orientation session for study abroad? Now, those of us above a certain age, let's say 40 and older, when we went abroad at 18, 20, 22, often we were abroad before our parents knew we were gone. Am I right? Yes, but no, now we can't trust our child to gather the information in college about the study abroad program they've already been admitted to. We have to attend that and pay attention and gather all the details. All right, so this is what I'm seeing. I was seeing on my campus. Not with respect to every student or every parent, but a growing number every year. And it concerned me because my hunch was this was going to harm students, right? I don't care how impressive you are on paper. Can you think for yourself? Can you choose? Can you solve a problem? Can you cope with the regular things life is going to throw your way? Come on in, folks. There's plenty of seating right up here. You can come right on in and sit down up here. All right, my hunch was this would turn out to harm young people. And in fact, in recent years, a number of studies have come out, not only showing the mental health difficulties suffered by college students, but a causal relationship between those difficulties and an over-involved parenting style. So just a few stats from a few years ago. Of 100,000 college students surveyed, 51.3% of 100,000 felt overwhelming anxiety, 57% felt very lonely, 60.5% felt very sad, 8% had seriously considered suicide. These statistics are not just statistics, they're young people in our lives, in our colleges, and also in our communities, K through 12. You guys know this. You had Dr. Sonia Lythcott come and do a survey here. She's a nationally respected expert on what's going on with kids' mental health and wellness. And she was able to point out that here in Sammamish, the anxiety and depression levels among young people are 6 to 7 times the national average. So this concerns us, right? We want our children not just to get a certain GPA, to give us that bumper sticker for the back of our car. You know the bumper sticker, right? Anyone not know what I'm talking about? The one that bears the name of the college that's going to impress all the people behind you with how great you are? I mean, your kid is. We want them to do well, but I believe in my heart that even more than that, we want them to live and we want them to thrive. So I would give a speech every year at freshman orientation. Ironically, it's happening right now at Stanford today. My successor's successor. The speech I would give was, welcome to Stanford. Number 1, trust your kid. They've earned this. They have what it takes to thrive here. Number 2, trust us. We're not trying to get away with doing as little as we can here at Stanford. It's probably why you were obsessed with them coming here. Number 3, trust your kid, trust us. Now please leave was my third message on this night for a decade. And then you guys, one day after giving that speech about 7 years in a row, I came home the next night, the Wednesday night, and I sat down for dinner with Avery and Sawyer, my kids, and my husband. Sawyer was 10. I leaned over. We were having chicken, and I began cutting his meat for him. And a few of you are going, so? Those knives are sharp. And I realized in that moment, oh my goodness, you cannot just let go of your 18-year-old if you've been holding on too tightly to your 17-year-old, to your 16-year-old, to your 15-year-old. They don't just acquire skills and strength. You know, on the stroke of midnight, the day they start college, we're supposed to be preparing them along the way. I realized that I was sort of clipping and pruning my kids like little bonsai trees. You know, those lovely little specimens of a real tree. I had a real successful human in mind, and I was clipping and pruning my children so that they might resemble that ideal I had in mind, clipping them like a bonsai tree, treating them like it was well beyond cutting his meat, is what I'm trying to tell you. I was hovering over every piece of homework. I was, just tying their Velcroing their shoes too long. I was just in it, just all up in it, thinking if I could just be aware of every single thing my kids will go to the college I have in mind. And I was worried about every little thing, and like they were an investment in the stock market. I had them on a leash like they were a dog performing in a dog show, but I was the trainer. I was the one issuing the commands, and all they had to do was follow me and wait for a treat. When I realized I was on track to be one of those parents that couldn't let go, it was a humbling moment. And I moved from being a finger-wagging dean criticizing other people to being a very compassionate dean who could empathize with parents and talk about what we are doing with the most loving of intentions, but with some pretty hard outcomes for our kids. So I'm going to tell you a few personal stories. Like some people you may know, I was always obsessed with my kids going to the right school. Anyone know anyone who's always been obsessed with that? Raise your hand. A few people. Well, where I live in Palo Alto, the right school is Bing Nursery School. It's the nursery school attached to Stanford. And I knew before I had children that if I ever had children, I wanted them to get their rightful start in life at Bing. It's a lab for the psychology faculty. They study infants and toddlers and young children, their parents too, I'm sure, behind one-way mirrors. So anyway, my son Sawyer is born in 1999. I have a C-section. I'm in the hospital for 5 days. When we're ready to go home, my husband is carrying Sawyer to the car, straps him into the infant car seat for the first time. Remember when it was a real baby for the first time? You weren't practicing. And, our hearts are beating rapidly. I'm just trying to get my stapled together C-section self to the car. Dan gets in the car. We're driving up the highway. A highway you can go, 65 miles an hour on, but we're going 40 because we've got our infant. And we get to our house, and my husband turns off the car and unbuckles himself and comes out and begins to get our son. I say, honey, actually, could you just go into the house and to my desk, there's a stack of papers. Deep in the stack is an application for Bing Nursery School, because I'd had it for 2 years. But you guys, they require a name of the child and a birth date. Well, we had that now. So I said, fill out the form. We need to get back in the car and turn in our application at Bing, because you guys, he was 5 days old. I didn't want to ruin his chances. Did I mention I'd had him at Stanford Hospital because I thought it might help? So Sawyer went to Bing, and 2 years later, his little sister joined him there. And one day I was picking up Avery when she was about 4. I was picking her up at Bing, and the teacher pulled me aside and said, Julie, do you have time to look at what Avery did in nursery school today? That nursery school voice. And I'm thinking, no, I don't have any time at all. I'm a full-time working parent. This is the one afternoon I'm home with my kids. I need to get this kid. I need to get the other kid. We're going to go home, have lots of fun, and then I'm going to go back to work and work late into the night, as I did every Wednesday. But I didn't say any of that. Who would say that out loud? Instead, I said, sure, I have time. And she walked me over to a round table, and on the round table were 12 to 15 small canvases this big. You guys in the back, feel free to come in. There are plenty of seats up here. Just walk right past these folks. They won't mind. All right, 15 canvases, all painted in watercolor by my 4-year-old daughter, done it with a Q-tip. You know what I was thinking? Where am I going to put all this art? It's Wednesday. If she's this prolific by Friday, we'll be out of wall space. But I didn't say that. The teacher, I'm just nodding and smiling. The teacher's trying to tell me that Avery is talented. She's saying, look at how she's used every border of these canvases 15 times. Look at what she's doing. The teacher, in all seriousness, was telling me my 4-year-old girl had some talent. And I smiled and I nodded and I tried to act like I cared. But inside I was thinking, yeah, but that's just art. That's not going to get her into Stanford. My artist daughter, well, my son loves to read books. Had language before he could walk. Has had a book in his hand since he was about 4. Never lets it go. Took books on play dates. Wants to read at dinner. We let him read at breakfast. Puts books in the pocket of his cargo shorts. I mean, this kid just loves to read. So by now we've moved to the Palo Alto Unified School District for elementary school. This is the best school district in our community, maybe even our state. We bought a dilapidated house nobody else wanted in order to get into these public schools. And then once we were there, we were doing everything to maximize their advantage. I would go to curriculum night, back to school night, in the 2nd grade, and cram my body into those small seats and raise my hand and say, in all seriousness, what do we need to do to be successful in the 3rd grade? Fast forward to high school, we're still very involved in every element of homework, cutting. We're no longer cutting meat, but we're still involved in just the micromanagement of the minutia. Sawyer's still got books in the pocket of his cargo shorts, and I'm wondering, when is he going to realize the girl he has a crush on doesn't like boys with books tucked into their cargo shorts? And then he found one who was. It was the sweetest thing. He began to be really serious about science, biology, chemistry. He also loves philosophy, mythology, the classics. I'm watching my bright boy just continue to absorb. I'm watching the curiosity just get juicier and juicier as he enjoys the rigor of a very rigorous public school education in Palo Alto. Well, when Sawyer was in 10th grade, right about now in the 10th grade, he started doing about 5 hours of homework a night. Does that seem like a lot or normal? Normal, right? It wasn't the junior year, which we've all agreed is hell. We're all complicit in that. Oh, the junior year, that's horrible, right? Oh, the colleges have, you have to do, right? Don't sleep as a junior, right? Ha ha, he, but that's the message our kids get. But this was sophomore year. I thought we had one more year before the hellish year. But no, 5 hours of homework. Spanish 3, Honors Chem, Algebra 2 Trig, Fancy English, Algebra 2 Trig Fast Lane, Fancy English, Fancy History, 2 other classes. I don't remember them all, but you get the point. All right? And I began to notice as my kid was doing 5 hours of homework, my kid with ADD, my kid whose joy in life is reading for pleasure, he doesn't have time for reading. He's coming home, he's reading a little bit at snack, then does homework, takes a break for about an hour for dinner, does more homework. And then it's like 11:30 or 12, and he's going to bed finally. I start to worry. By the first weekend, we're noticing our kid is really tired. His eyes are red. He's lost the spring in his step. My husband and I sit down with him to help him figure out how to make this work. We're sure it's a problem that just can be solved if we apply the right thinking to it. Can you break the large assignments down into small? Can you be better at time management? Can you avoid some procrastination tendencies? Let's role play with you how to talk with your teachers about the problem of all this work and get their advice. Sawyer tries to do these things. He's now doing homework, 6 and 7 days that week, and then into the second week, and then into that second weekend, and into the third week. And by now, Sawyer's no longer bringing a book to breakfast. He's just going through the motions, coming down, not making much eye contact, hand on his cheek, elbow supporting his head. One night in the end of week 3, it's 11:30, and Sawyer's at the computer in the kitchen, and I can see that he's left Spanish for last, as had been the trend I can see it because he's at the desktop computer in our kitchen, and so his back is to me, and I can see the screen. And I'm noticing to my horror that Sawyer's not even doing the Spanish 3. Google Translate is doing it for him. Do you know what I mean? You type in the English, it tells you the Spanish, he writes it down. My kid is officially cheating. My kid is officially cheating to get the grade he thinks is needed. I go to my husband. I tell him what's going on. I say, what are we going to do? This is just the sophomore year. It's only October, I think it was, of the sophomore year. Where does this go? Where does this end? This is not sustainable. But we had in mind that he would have access to the very best higher education, the biggest brand names, the ones that expect all this, not just expect you to do it, but that you do it darn well, almost perfectly. But we looked at our boy and began to be worried. We'd been worried for 2 weeks, and he'd been working so hard and trying, and nothing was letting up. It seemed, in fact, to be getting worse. So we agreed to ask him if he needed to drop a class. The task was going to be mine. By now it's midnight, and Sawyer is done with his homework. I go upstairs, I knock on his bedroom door. He yells, "Come in." He was already in bed, sleeping in the loft his daddy had built for him when he was little, the Harry Potter loft that I think Dan built when Sawyer was 5 or 6. So my 15-year-old is up at his loft, and I climb the steps to the loft, and I look down at my firstborn child, and I say, "Sweetheart, Dad and I are so impressed with how hard you're working. You're really persevering. You're sticking with it, working so hard. But we're concerned. It just looks like it might be too much. You don't even have time to read anymore. Do you think you might need to drop a class?" And my baby looks up at me and says, "Mom, can I? Don't you guys want me to do all of this? Isn't this what'll make you proud?" And you know what I was thinking? We bought this house here, right here, so you could go to that great high school and take all of these amazing classes and do well in them and have the future we have in mind. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I looked at Sawyer and I said, "Honey, yeah, in some theoretical universe, we wanted you to have access to all of these opportunities. But what matters more than any of that is you. And you're struggling, and you might even be suffering. Do you think you might need to drop a class?" And Sawyer said, "I'll think about it." Well, the next day he came down to breakfast with a book under his arm, which I took as a good sign. And he sat down at our little breakfast counter and he said, "Mom, I think I might need to drop a class. And I think it might need to be Spanish." And I said, "Yeah, I thought the Spanish might be part of the problem." I was revising the text of How to Raise an Adult as all of this was happening. I was writing down the mental health information. And I had in front of me a boy whose entire countenance was changing for the worse. I couldn't even see it in my own house until finally I did. And I was able to see my son in his struggle, because I was also learning by writing this book that there are more colleges than the U.S. News Top 20. There are so many more schools than anybody knows. So many. We have an abundance of great universities and colleges in this country. I didn't know that as a Stanford undergraduate, as a Harvard law student. As a Stanford dean, I began to learn about the great small colleges in our country, the great community colleges, the great big publics. I was beginning to know, but I finally connected the dots of what I knew and the research that I brought into this book with what I was seeing in the face of my child. Smart, intellectually curious, completely overwhelmed by the workload. I had to accept in offering, "Do you need to drop a class?" I had to accept that the so-called best colleges might not want my boy. My incredibly bright, hardworking boy. We coached Sawyer on how to talk to his guidance counselor, who very predictably said, "Sawyer, you can't drop Spanish because colleges want to see it." And Sawyer said, colleges want to see language proficiency, often demonstrated by 3 years of study, and I bet I'm not going to impress them with the D I'm likely to get. And if I drop Spanish, I'll have one fewer class assigning all the work and one more hour in the day in which to do my work, and I can do my honors chemistry, which I love, and the Algebra 2 Trig and the fancy history and the fancy English and the 2 other classes. Well, guys, Sawyer dropped Spanish 3, and we got our Sawyer back. Yeah. And when it came time to apply to college, my boy is now 18. When it came time a year ago to begin to apply, he put some of those places on his list. He's accomplished enough that maybe they belong on his list. But I knew this is a kid who not only dropped Spanish, but doesn't do any activities. He just reads and thinks. Try impressing at college these days with that. No activities, no sports, no leadership, no community service, no accolades, no awards. Just a really great kid who reads and thinks. He applied to 13 schools and was denied admission at 7. Looking at his options, 6, one of them was a college called Reed in Portland. And when Reed College admitted Sawyer George Lythcott Haims, well, they sent him a book. And not just any book. They sent him the Iliad. And my kid's the kind of kid that sees the Iliad and his eyes light up with joy. I know better than to cry in front of my kids. I know my then 17-year-old son doesn't want to see me tearing up. So I had to take myself into the other room to send a little silent thank you to Reed for seeing my son, for saying, we see you, we like you, you're one of us. Come. In the month he had to decide which of these offers to accept, Sawyer was filled with indecision. He didn't seem to be able to make a decision, so my husband and I were trying to help him at every turn. Every day we'd check in on how he was doing with making the decision. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want us to talk about it. We got him some therapy, 3 sessions with a guy who diagnosed him with ADD. Like, go back and talk to Dr. Alper. And he met him at Starbucks and talked about whatever. 3 sessions in April. We were just so worried. He was so worried, you guys. He didn't seem to be able to make a decision. I was out on book tour. I would consult with experts, teachers and principals and other places. Like, my son can't decide where to go to college. One of them said, maybe you need to back off a little. But I couldn't hear that. I wrote this book, you guys. I know what I'm doing. So one night late, about April 17th, Sawyer is home from a date with a girl who likes boys who carry books. And I'm up late having a glass of wine. And we have our great mother-son talks in these late hours of the night. So we chit-chat, and then Sawyer says to me, he walks to me and he puts his arm on my shoulder. And he looks me in the eye, and with a kind face, he says, Mom, I have a lot of anxiety about this process of deciding where to go to college. I said, I know, honey, I know, I see it. Dad and I are trying to help you know. We have this matrix that we can offer you where you lay out all the factors on one axis and the schools on the other, and we can help you do this. And he paused. I don't know, I was talking, but there was something in his face that made me pause. He said, Mom, I think the root of my anxiety is you guys. This kid looked his mother in the eye and said that. And you know what I was thinking. Oh no, this cannot possibly be true, my son. You don't understand. I know about all the research. We've really done this well. We're not stressing you out. We're helping you out, right? I didn't say any of that. I've learned to button it. Instead, what I said with a smile was, Sawyer, I'm proud of you. I imagine it wasn't easy for you to say that to me. If you have more to share, I'm open to hearing it, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. The next morning, I woke my husband up. You're not going to believe what Sawyer told me last night. It's us. So we called Sawyer into our room. My husband reiterated what I had said. And then we said this, honey, we love you. This is your decision to make, and we know you're capable of making it. 7 days later, I was on book tour in St. Louis, got a text from Sawyer at about midnight St. Louis time. Mom, got time to talk? Heck yeah. I called him. He says, Mom, I've decided to go to Reed. And I know it's the right decision because every time I picture myself on a campus, it's Reed. And when I told Dad and Avery I was going to Reed, I felt so excited and telling him. I've already told you I try not to cry in front of my son, but here I was, shielding my tears, delighted the dean of freshmen in me could hear in this boy's voice. He had felt that sense of fit and belonging we preach about. He had found it, and he was going to Reed. And my husband and I dropped him off there 3 weeks ago. And it was excruciating, but that's a different story to tell. But he's doing fine. I realize a lot. Thank you. There are better lists than U.S. News and World Report. U.S. News is sort of advocating or insisting for many of us how to parent, how to raise children, what childhood should look like. They have to have the right grades and scores and accolades and awards and leadership and sports and activities and service, etc. All of that to get into the top schools, according to U.S. News, leaves many of them breathless at a time of life when they should feel exhilarated. Gwen Ifill, the late Gwen Ifill, host of PBS NewsHour, said the U.S. News college issue is like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. And not just because it's so exciting to look at. Because it's the one issue annually on which the entire magazine franchise rests financially. It's the one issue that makes them any money. They're preying upon our anxieties, U.S. News. They're profiting from our anxieties. There are better lists like Colleges That Change Lives, 40 Small Schools, where the alumni uniformly say, this place changed my life. None of them have huge brand names, but they're making a difference in the lives of undergraduates. The Alumni Factor is a better list, shows alumni outcomes at 225 colleges and universities, from finances and net worth to happiness, to intellectual engagement, to social and political views. Better ways to measure what is this place, what do they offer, what will the experience be. I realize the hard way, you guys, that Sawyer and Avery are not bonsai trees for me to clip and prune. They're not little dogs on a leash. They're not investments I might sell off because they're not doing well. They're wildflowers. They're wildflowers. My children, your children, deserving a chance at this life we have given them. And yes, we have given it to them, but life is to be lived. We don't want to be dragging them down the path of their life toward what we have in mind, putting our helicopter rotors in motion and lifting them to some summit we've always dreamed for them. I will tell you, if we do that and plant the flag in their hand at that summit, they are bewildered, knowing they didn't get there on their own, wondering how to do anything else without the continued involvement, intense involvement of parents. Our job as parents is actually to put ourselves out of a job, to raise these young humans with the ability to work hard and be kind to others and get out there and start to live their lives. It's not about the brand name of the college they attend. It's, do they have the wellness and the sense of self to thrive wherever they go? We have a crisis at hand in communities like mine, maybe even yours, and plenty of others, where our young people have been made to feel that their worth as humans is their GPA, the number of APs they're taking, what they get on the AP tests and the SAT and the ACT and the SAT-2s. We have made them feel, none of you, not me for sure, but other people near us have made our children feel that their worth as a human comes down to that stuff. And what they need to hear from every adult in their life, every teacher, every parent is, you matter to us because you exist. We love you because you're ours, not about your grades and scores and accolades and awards. So what do you say, Skyline? Do you think we can love our kids for who they are, not because of their GPA? Are you with me? All right. I got it. A few practical things to say now before I send you off to curriculum night, where you must not say, what do we need to do to be successful in the 9th grade, right? All right. Stop saying we when you mean your kid. You know, we're on the travel soccer team. We're in AP Bio. No, you're not on the travel soccer team. You just try running up and down the field, you know? You're not in AP Bio. You might have taken it before. It's your kid's turn. Stop arguing. Number 2, stop arguing with every authority figure in their lives. Teachers are drowning under the volume of emails they get from parents who think they're the only ones emailing them all the time. Okay? Teach your kid to advocate for themselves. Do that role modeling about how they might talk to the teacher or the principal or the assistant principal or whatever staff member. But we're supposed to be teaching them to do this, not pretending we'll always be there to have the tough conversations with these folks. And I would add in coaches and referees and umpires. You know what number 3 is? Stop doing their homework. Parents are doing kids' homework. Did you know that? Raise your hand if you know someone who's doing their kids' homework. Come on now. Skyline. How can we not? If we just let them do their homework, if we don't even look at it, our kid will be competing with everyone else's parents. We have to make it taboo to assault our teenagers at the door. We assault them when they get home from school or we come home from work with these questions. How much homework do you have? When are you going to do your homework? When are we going to do your homework? Or, how'd you do on the science test today? Or, what happened on the science test today? Do you guys have one of those portals? Oh, right? And the kid's like, I don't know. I studied. I don't know. Can I just put my bag down? Mom, Dad? How would you feel if you got home from work and the people who love you the most said, how was that meeting today? Was it better than yesterday? Are you going to do better tomorrow? We know better than to ask one another the questions most on our minds. I wonder who he voted for. I wonder what her salary is. I wonder how their sex life is. We know we're not supposed to ask each other certain things. We've got to make it taboo to ask teenagers, what's your college list? Are you taking the ACT or the SAT? Which colleges did you get into? Why? Because it's none of our business. This is one of the most private things the teenagers got going, and we act as if it's all on display, and then they see in our faces whether we approve it or not. We are harming them with these questions, and more often than not, with our response to their answers. We need to be role models for the things we actually think we believe. If you actually believe that a kid can get a great education at any number of places, 4-year schools, 2-year schools, publics, privates, brand name, no brand name, then you can be the person in this community who says the following. When your friend says, oh, Johnny's a sophomore now, where is he going to apply to college? Right, that's a ridiculously early question. But I know it gets asked here, Skyline. Okay? When somebody, all right, fine, Palo Alto, who's Palo Alto to talk to Skyline? Fine, all right? When they say, where's your kid applying? You say, oh, we're not obsessed about that in our family. And your friend laughs and is like, no, really. And you're like, no, really. We used to be obsessed, but we know there are plenty of schools, and we don't obsess about it. We know he'll find the right fit and belonging when the time comes. Your friend's mouth will be gaping open by this point, and into their open mouth you drop this. You say, oh, but I'd love it if Johnny would apply to St. Olaf's. Anyone? No St. Olaf's? St. Olaf's, okay, right? Oh, I'd love it if she'd apply to Grinnell, Iowa. Oh, Elon's one of my favorite, North Carolina. Okay, what am I doing? I'm dropping the names of small liberal arts colleges no one has heard of into your community conversation because you're all respected people. And if you stand there confidently say, we're not stressed, we're not obsessed, they're going to go get a great education. I'd really love it if they went to one of these places. Your friends will say, well, it's good enough for Steve. Maybe it's good enough for me. You know, if he's okay with it, she's okay with it for their kid, maybe we can let our kid widen their blinders and look at more schools. And when we're able to do that, we're able to bring a bit of childhood back to children. Because most of these places that offer a fantastic education are not asking children to mortgage their childhoods in exchange for a chance of admission. Thank you very much.